The Blind Frog Ranch team forced open the forbidden basement hidden beneath the main cabin, an area Duane Ollinger has avoided for years. The room was sealed with reinforced beams, rusted hardware, and a layer of sediment that suggested it hadn't been touched in decades. But what they found inside shocked the entire crew and triggered the most violent reaction the ranch has ever recorded. Before we uncover the truth, make sure to subscribe, because what happened next may finally explain why the ranch has been hiding something underground. The basement had been sealed for so long that even longtime crew members spoke about it in lowered voices, unsure whether the rumors around it were exaggerated or dangerously accurate. What made it so unsettling wasn't just the padlocked door or the reinforced concrete around the entrance. It was the fact that Duane Ollinger himself had insisted for years that this was one spot on the ranch no one was allowed to touch. Not researchers, not camera crews, not even close friends. The unspoken rule was simple. Whatever was down there was better left alone. But everything changed after the most recent seismic event sent a deep, rolling vibration across the property. A tremor so strong it rattled the soil like something shifting beneath the ranch. Sensors pointed directly toward the sealed basement, and every reading suggested one impossible conclusion: activity was coming from below it. The team exchanged uneasy glances as Duane approached the basement door, his flashlight beam cutting across dust that hadn't been disturbed in decades. The air felt heavier here, as though the atmosphere itself resisted being breathed in. When Duane unlatched the corroded metal hasp, the crew fell silent. For a moment, he hesitated, gripping the handle as if reconsidering whether opening it was a mistake. The ground beneath their feet vibrated again, a short, sharp pulse, like a muted heartbeat rising from deep underground, and that was enough. Duane pulled the door open. A dense, cold draft spilled out immediately, carrying a metallic scent mixed with damp earth. The temperature dropped nearly 10 degrees in seconds, fogging their breath. The stairs leading down vanished into darkness deeper than anything their lights could easily penetrate, and a low hum vibrated faintly from somewhere below, steady and rhythmic, like a distant engine buried in stone. The crew stared into the descent, realizing instantly that the rumors were wrong. The basement wasn't forbidden because it was dangerous. It was forbidden because something underneath it was waking up. The team descended the narrow staircase slowly, each step echoing with a hollow metallic ring that suggested the space beneath the ranch was far larger than Duane had ever implied. Dust drifted from the ceiling as their boots touched the concrete, and the faint hum they heard above had grown into a steady, rhythmic vibration that pressed gently against their chests. It didn't sound mechanical, it sounded alive. Duane swept his flashlight across the basement, revealing walls lined with aged support beams, rusted metal shelving, and collapsed equipment that looked decades old. But none of that explained the cold mist curling across the floor or the deep pulsing resonance radiating up through the cement. A row of overturned crates rested against the far wall, half buried under tarps, and the air around them seemed to shimmer faintly, as though heat or energy were leaking from beneath the floor. The hum shifted pitch only slightly, but the effect was immediate. The nearest light flickered, then dimmed to a dull glow. They had experienced power anomalies around the ranch before, but nothing like this. This felt controlled, intentional. Someone muttered that the signal was coming from beneath them, and the crew gathered around the center of the room where the cement appeared subtly raised, forming a nearly perfect rectangular outline, barely visible under years of dust. Duane crouched, running his hand across the seam, tracing the edges of what appeared to be a hidden hatch or subfloor entrance. His expression hardened. This wasn't on any map of the property, not even in the original mining records. The hum pulsed again, stronger this time, sending vibrations up their legs. A faint crack echoed from below, followed by a low exhale-like rush of air that made the hair on their arms stand straight. The ground felt warm now, almost as if something beneath the slab were stirring. The crew stepped stepped back instinctively, realizing this wasn't just a basement, it was a barrier, one that had been sealed for a reason. Duane stood slowly, shining his light across the walls again, searching for any indication of who built this or what they intended to hide. But the room offered no answers, only the steady, rising pulse from below, growing louder with each passing second, as though whatever lay beneath the ranch had finally sensed they were here. The hum beneath the slab deepened into a resonant thrum that vibrated through their bones, and Duane motioned for the team to set up ground-penetrating equipment. They worked quickly, unspooling cables across the basement floor while the handheld sensors flickered with static interference. Not random, but patterned, almost rhythmic, as if reacting to their presence. When the scanner powered on, its display jumped heavily, the waveforms spiking in precise intervals that matched the pulses they felt under the concrete. It was the same pattern the ranch had produced during past incidents, but stronger, more organized. Whatever was below them wasn't dormant, it was active. One technician ran a thermal sweep, but the screen returned nothing but distortion. Instead of capturing heat signatures, it bent into shapes that wavered like silhouettes, shifting behind fogged glass. Another attempt produced a sudden cascade of pixelated bursts, short, vertical streaks that climbed the monitor like something trying to rise through the image itself. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. Instruments malfunctioned on the ranch all the time. But this felt different. This felt targeted. Duane knelt beside the slab again, studying the faint seam with a focused intensity. The concrete around it wasn't poured at the same time as the rest of the basement. It was slightly darker, smoother, as though installed later by someone who wanted to seal whatever lay beneath with precision. As he brushed more dust aside, his fingers caught something unexpected. Metal, a recessed handle barely visible, flush with the floor. He froze for a moment. No one had reported anything like this in the ranch's records or its numerous surveys. The hum shifted again, this time followed by a hollow knock from below. Not loud, but deliberate. 3 slow taps, spaced evenly apart, the same 3-beat pattern that had defined nearly every unexplained event on the ranch. The crew stepped back in a ripple of fear as the monitors echoed the sound a half-second later, displaying synchronized spikes that rose in perfect unison. The floor warmed beneath their feet, subtle but undeniable. The concrete seemed to breathe, expanding in soft, shallow movements, timed with the pulses coming from below. The air thickened with a metallic scent that hinted at machinery or something far older, lurking beneath the sealed entrance. Duane exhaled slowly, realizing they were no longer just observing an anomaly. They were standing on top of it. The recessed handle embedded in the slab looked old, far older than the basement around it, but the metal was clean, almost polished, as if whatever lay beneath generated enough energy to keep corrosion away. Duane crouched beside it, running a gloved finger along the seam. The concrete surrounding the panel showed faint stress lines, not from age, but from pressure pushing upward, as though something below had been testing the barrier for years. The team exchanged apprehensive glances. Nothing on Blind Frog Ranch ever stayed still for long. But this felt different. This felt intentional. They brought in a portable winch system to test the panel's resistance. The hook latched firmly into the handle, and as the device powered on, its motor strained immediately, groaning under the load. The slab didn't budge. Instead, a deep tone resonated through the room, a low, vibrating hum that grew louder with each second of force. The team stopped instantly, fearing the structure might respond violently. When the motor released tension, the hum softened, settling back into a slow, rhythmic pulse. A technician checked the readings and frowned. The sensors weren't just detecting energy, they were detecting movement beneath the slab. Slow, almost imperceptible oscillations, rising and falling, like something breathing. The thermal scanner flickered again, this time producing a distorted image, a faint, elongated shape directly under the panel, radiating a heat signature inconsistent with geological formations. The outline wasn't perfectly human, but it wasn't entirely foreign either. It looked coiled, contained, waiting. Then the concrete shifted, barely a fraction of an inch, but enough for dust to lift off the floor in a trembling ripple. The recessed handle jerked suddenly, just once, as though pulled from the other side. The crew staggered back in shock, several drawing instinctive breaths through clenched teeth. No one spoke, no one moved. The ranch had shown aggression before, but never physical interaction with a sealed structure. This was a new threshold, one the team wasn't prepared for. Duane steadied himself and signaled for another scan. The GPR sweep illuminated the slab in tight waves, mapping the space beneath. A cavity, large and rectangular, appeared on the display. The walls of the underground chamber were unnaturally smooth, and at the center, something metallic reflected back a perfect signal. But before they could analyze it further, every monitor in the room froze. The waveforms flattened into a single sharp line. The temperature dropped by nearly 8 degrees in under 5 seconds, and then, through the sudden silence, the same 3-beat knock echoed from below, louder this time, confident and deliberate. Something under the slab wasn't just stirring, it was responding. The 3-beat knock echoed through the basement again, this time strong enough to rattle dust from the rafters. The crew froze, waiting for a fourth strike that never came. Instead, the silence thickened into something almost tangible, as though the entire ranch were listening. Duane steadied himself, exhaling slowly while the others checked their monitors, but the readings made no sense. The energy signatures weren't random. They were patterned, coherent, rising and falling with deliberate intent. The ground beneath the slab vibrated in a controlled rhythm, too precise to be seismic activity. A technician switched the spectrograph into deeper analysis, and the waveform that appeared on the screen made his jaw drop. The pulses weren't just rhythmic, they were modulated, structured, as if something beneath the basement was communicating in a frequency just low enough to slip beneath human hearing, but strong enough to shake the foundation. Another thermal sweep flickered across the slab's surface, and this time, a clearer outline formed beneath. The shape wasn't lying still, it was shifting, curling, expanding as though waking from a long, dormant state. Heat radiated outward, distorting the image in slow waves that suggested deliberate movement. The technicians whispered anxiously, but Duane leaned in closer, studying the readings with narrowed eyes. Whatever was down there wasn't inert. It was adjusting itself, reacting to their attempts to uncover it. Suddenly, the GPR scanner spiked to maximum capacity, filling the display with violent surges. A rectangular mass inside the chamber began to hum, resonating at the same frequency as the slab. The metallic object at the center, whatever it was, had activated. A sharp pop split the air, and every light in the basement snapped off. For 3 suffocating seconds, the team stood in absolute darkness. Then, the slab glowed. A thin line of pale blue light traced the seam around the panel, pulsing in sync with the underground chamber. The basement filled with a low harmonic tone that vibrated through their bones. One crew member stumbled backward, clutching his chest as the pressure intensified. Another dropped her equipment as her vision wavered with the resonance. Duane shouted for everyone to stand back, but his voice was swallowed by the rising hum. The light spread outward across the floor, following invisible pathways etched beneath the concrete. Geometric lines, perfectly symmetrical, connecting the slab to the rest of the basement like circuitry. The ranch had always responded to human activity, but this was different. This felt like activation, not reaction. The pulse beneath the slab intensified until the air itself trembled. 3 beats, a pause. 3 beats stronger than before. The pattern struck the crew like a physical force, pushing them backward as the basement filled with a pressure that made the walls groan. The metallic object below surged again, sending a final shockwave that shattered one of the monitors in a spray of sparks. And then the glowing lines winked out. The hum stopped. The basement fell silent. But the slab remained warm. Warm like something alive beneath it had finally opened its eyes. The crew worked in tense silence as the last sparks died from the damaged monitor. No one wanted to speak the obvious truth. Something beneath the basement had just initiated a response, and none of their equipment could explain how. Duane steadied his flashlight and motioned the team forward, but even he hesitated before crossing the threshold. The The warmth radiating from the slab had spread through the concrete, rising in slow waves that felt unnatural for stone sealed away from sunlight. When the lights finally flickered back on, every instrument in the room flashed with scrambled data, except one. The infrasound receiver had come back online with perfect clarity, its needle twitching in a steady rhythm that mirrored the pulse beneath the slab. The crew gathered around it, watching as the frequency stabilized into a narrow band, far too controlled to be geological. Whatever was below them was emitting a signal again, stronger, clearer, almost as if the earlier surge had sharpened its ability to communicate. A cold draft swept across the room, despite the lack of any open vent. The air pressure shifted in a subtle but unmistakable drop, pulling a chill up their spines. The temperature sensors detected it simultaneously, falling degrees in perfect sync with the frequency bursts. One technician whispered that it felt like the ranch itself was inhaling. Another muttered that something beneath the slab was changing the air around it. Then the floor trembled, not a violent shake, something far worse, a slow, deliberate upward push, like the earth was swelling beneath their feet. The vibration traveled through the soles of their boots, rising into their legs with an almost biological rhythm. Duane raised a hand for silence. The pulses were counting again. 3 beats, a pause. 3 beats, each stronger, deeper, more resonant. The seismic monitor lit up with a new reading, but this time the waveform wasn't random. The pattern looked engineered, curving arches, repeating nodes, intervals too precise to be natural. One of the technicians gasped. The signal resembled a blueprint, a layout, a map. The lines converged into a shape centered beneath the slab, a chamber with a secondary structure attached to it, one that hadn't shown up in any previous scans. The structure flashed in rhythmic pulses, almost like a heartbeat, feeding its signal through the basement floor. As the tremors intensified, dust drifted down from the ceiling in a thin mist, and a faint metallic scent seeped into the air, sharp, cold, and strangely clean, as though an ancient reservoir had finally been breached. A sudden clang echoed from within the slab, deep and hollow, like a metal latch shifting under immense pressure. The crew jumped back, eyes locked on the seam. The concrete around the slab darkened, soaking in moisture from within. Something behind the panel was expanding or waking. Duane called for evacuation, but before they could step back, the slab emitted a sudden, deafening snap. A hairline crack shot across its surface, glowing faintly with the same blue light as before. Everyone froze. The pulse beneath them steadied into a single continuous hum, one that felt less like a warning and more like an invitation or a countdown. The glowing crack across the slab widened in a slow, steady crawl, releasing a thin ribbon of cold air that drifted across the basement like fog. The temperature dropped instantly. Breath crystallized in front of their faces, and a low mechanical groan vibrated through the walls as if the entire ranch were shifting under their feet. Duane stepped back, shouting for everyone to stay clear, but the crew barely heard him. The hum beneath the slab had changed again. It was no longer pulsing. It was speaking. The infrasound receiver translated the vibrations into a visible waveform on the remaining monitor. The pattern repeated in perfect intervals, forming sharp peaks and descending arcs with mathematical precision. One technician whispered that it looked like a sequencing code, something engineered, intentional. Suddenly, the lights flickered out. Everything went black except for the faint blue glow leaking from the widening crack. The crew's flashlights snapped on in trembling hands, beams slicing through the cold haze swirling around their legs. A deep, resonant thud rose from below the slab, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. Another followed, closer, heavier, like something large shifting inside a confined space. The ground rippled beneath their boots, not a random tremor. A deliberate push from below. The crack split further, releasing a sharp metallic hiss as if pressure built for decades was finally escaping. A thin, unnatural wind swept upward, carrying the scent of iron and something older, like stone soaked in ancient water. Duane backed toward the stairs, his voice low and urgent. "We're done. Out! Now! But before the team could retreat, the slab pulsed once more, bright enough to wash the entire basement in a cold, ghostly light. The vibration tightened around them, focusing on the center of the room. Every sensor spiked at once, alarms screeching in a single, unified warning. The signal coming from the chamber below was no longer dormant. It was active, and whatever had been sealed under Blind Frog Ranch was no longer contained. The team scrambled for the staircase as the basement floor vibrated beneath them in short, rapid bursts. Too controlled to be seismic, too rhythmic to be natural. The crack across the slab widened again, releasing another blast of frigid air that swept upward like a breath from something buried far below. Dust lifted from the ground in spiraling threads, pulled toward the opening as if drawn by an invisible current. Duane shouted for everyone to move, his voice cutting through the alarms as tools rattled off shelves and crashed to the floor. Halfway up the stairs, the crew froze. A low, resonant tone rolled through the basement, deep enough to vibrate their chests and heavy enough to make the walls tremble. It wasn't sound, it was pressure, a force pushing outward from whatever lay beneath the slab. The blue light leaking from the crack flickered, then stabilized into a steady glow that illuminated the basement in an eerie underwater haze. One of the cameras, still miraculously recording, captured the light bending in unnatural waves, distorting the air like heat mirage, but colder, much colder. Then the vibration changed again, no longer pulses, a rising sequence, building, anticipating. The slab bowed upward in the center, stone flexing in a way stone should not be capable of. Hairline fractures spread outward like spider webs, and the hum climbed in pitch until it scraped the edge of human hearing. The crew backed up the final steps, pulling Duane with them just as the floor exhaled, an explosive burst of cold air that extinguished every light and left the entire ranch in darkness. For a moment, there was nothing, only silence. Then, movement. A soft shifting sound rose from below the slab, like something dragging across metal or stone, slow, measured. A presence, aware that the barrier containing it had weakened. The basement crack glowed once more, dim, then bright, then dim again, flashing in a deliberate sequence that mirrored the waveform on the monitors earlier. 3 pulses, a pause, 3 pulses, a message, a warning, or a response. The crew finally burst out of the basement door into the cold night air, gasping as the pressure dropped away from their skulls. But the ranch did not settle. The ground beneath the house rippled in a final wave that traveled outward across the property, sending livestock into a frenzy and triggering motion sensors from the pond to the excavation site. Whatever lived beneath Blind Frog Ranch was no longer sleeping, and the moment they opened that forbidden basement slab, it woke up.